The Navigating Disability podcast often discusses topics including disability, injury, mental health, and mentions of sensitive issues such as trauma and suicide. Listener discretion is advised. Please take care while listening. Welcome to Navigating Disability. Today we're joined by Bruce Simpson, a passionate advocate, lawyer, and leader in the disability sector. As a person with lived experience of disability and a suicide attempt survivor, Bruce brings a powerful perspective on resilience, mental health, and advocacy. With years of experience in accessibility, inclusion, and policy, he is dedicated to breaking down barriers and creating meaningful change. Join us as we discuss his journey, the importance of lived experience, and how strong advocacy can help build a more inclusive world. Thank you so much for joining us, Bruce. Welcome.
Thank you, Kate. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I do want to preface this with a trigger warning that we will be talking about suicide. So for people that that is a concern, please do know that will be covered in this podcast. So you have a pretty interesting story. Where's a good place to start, Bruce?
Well, the beginning is always a good place to start.
Go for it.
I'll give you a little brief background on me. I am a lawyer in Lexington, Kentucky, which is kind of like in the mid South or Middle West, I guess, of the United States. More on the eastern side of the United States than it is anywhere else, but pretty centrally located. Been practicing law for 42 years. I'm a trial lawyer, which means I trial cases in front of juries and judges sometimes, and also legislative bodies if I have a particular issue that has jurisdiction over a city council, a planning commission, administrative board, things of that nature. And I love what I do. However, I grew up in a family of 7. I was the oldest. And quite frankly, for most of my life, starting when I was a little boy, I've had very low self-esteem, primarily as I've learned in my therapy in the last couple of years, because my parents, they affirmed their love for me. I use that term loosely. When I performed well in sports, and when I didn't get much affirmation. And as a result of that, I felt never good enough for most of my life. I could never meet the expectations of the people for whom the expectations that I wanted to meet, which was my father primarily. And no matter how hard I practiced, no matter how hard I worked, I could only get to a certain point of performance, and that was never good enough. And quite candidly, I built that into my personality for the rest of my life. This started when I was about 10 years old. It carried for 8 years every day. And when you're a child and you're under that kind of, parental parenting, it can shape your whole attitude about the world and about life.
And about
and so
Bruce.
I'm sorry.
And about you personally, and
about me personally. Yourself. Yes, very low self-confidence. No matter, and I have since learned I suffer from something called imposter syndrome, where it doesn't matter how well I've actually performed. I never believed it was good enough. And quite frankly, I thought people were just being nice to me. I never thought it was genuine. In hindsight now, I can, I don't want to boast, but I finally became good enough, at least I perceived I was, in my early 40s. I'm 74 years old. I'll be 75 next month. And finally, in my early 40s, and I started to achieve some success as a lawyer, only because people would tell me, Bruce, I saw your trial, man. You did a great job. And I looked at them and I go, really? I didn't believe them. And I didn't accept their compliment as valid. I just thought, man, am I fooling you? I am faking you out. I know you're being nice, but You know, I like it. I like hearing it. It didn't go to my head, but it was the first time in my life that I actually felt worthy in the eyes of some people, which was good. And once I got that feeling, when you've never had it, when you felt unworthy all your life, no matter what you've in fact accomplished. I mean, by that time, I'd had a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a law degree. You would think, well, you've accomplished quite a bit academically. Why don't you feel good about yourself? Well, if you've grown up in the environment that I did, um, that's how you feel. And it doesn't matter how much education that you've had. So once I started to feel worthy, and at least in the eyes of other people whose opinion was that I was performing well to their satisfaction, and I would read about other attorneys that might get into trouble for one reason or another. They stole money from a client trust fund or got into criminal trouble in some other form or fashion, and their picture and story was on the front page of the local newspaper and television. They were being disbarred, going to prison, total humiliation publicly. And I would read about them. Not that I ever imagined doing anything that they did, but I just thought to myself, man, wow, if that was me, now that I'm feeling good about myself because people tell me I'm a quote unquote good lawyer, if I was that person, I'd kill myself. And honestly, for 30 years, um, I was entirely comfortable with self inflicted death if I ever perceived that people viewed me anything less than being a good lawyer.
Can I just
And
interrupt you there, Bruce? You're
yeah.
talking a lot about other people. You're finally meeting the acceptance and the approval of other people. But
Hmm.
would you say that that still doesn't change how you feel about yourself internally?
That's correct.
Yeah. And
Uh, when you're,
logically, you're doing well, but if you don't feel it inside, it's very hard to accept.
no, you're exactly right. I liked hearing it. It kept me going. It kept me feeling better than I was without those compliments. But internally, I didn't believe the compliments.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew I did okay, but I was never, I never, I just never felt like I'm still not good enough for me,
Yep.
for my expectations, because uh, my expectations could never be met anyway, and that was just part of my personality, formed at a very early age, and so I suffered in silence, um, entirely comfortable with self-inflicted death. I recall one incident about 25 years ago. My wife and I were taking a dream vacation to Europe. We were going to be gone 3 weeks. And about halfway across the Atlantic Ocean, the thought occurred to me, did I miss the statute of limitations in this wrongful death case? It turned out that I hadn't, but I didn't know that until I got back. And I didn't want to think about it. There wasn't anything I could do about it. If I'd missed it, I'd missed it. And I didn't want to think about it because it was going to ruin my vacation. But of course, just as soon as you tell yourself not to think about something, you think about it. And I would think about it 15 or 20 times or more a day. And the only way that I found that I could cope for those 3 weeks was when I thought about it come up out of nowhere. Um, did I miss the statute of limitations? I would just tell myself, look, if you miss the statute of limitations on filing this case and you'd malpracticed, just kill yourself when you get home. It'll be over. You won't have any more pain. Just enjoy the last 3 weeks of your life. And that's what I did. And as bizarre as that sounds, as a coping mechanism, that was my coping mechanism. And I thought about it many times a day. A lot of my cases were published in the newspaper, and I would sometimes tell myself Bruce Simpson dead at 53. As kind of a little byline in the newspaper. Um,
Would you
just
say
just.
would you say you had a fixation on, suicide if you needed to, or was it a way out?
Um, it was a way out, but it was also a fixation. Um, I mean, it's hard for people, I think, to understand how could you ever have a comfort level of being ready to kill yourself for 30 years if you ever perceived people didn't think you were worthy of, you know, being what you wanted to be, which was a good lawyer. But that's a significant mental disability. That's a significant mental illness that I never, number one, I never believed I had a mental illness. I knew I had a Bruce Simpson personal inadequacy problem, but I just thought, well, everybody's got something. And you just, I was taught, suck it up, don't whine, don't complain, be a man, and,
Deal with
get
it.
on with your life. And so that's what I did. And I never shared it with anybody, nobody, ever. And I refused to accept the label of that I was mentally ill. I could, because that has such a stigma attached to it. Um, and I, quite frankly, I made fun of people in mental hospitals, um, growing up all my life.
I think
Uh,
we've all got a little bit of that in us, unfortunately.
yeah, it's a worldwide phenomenon. There's no question about it. But that was me, and I didn't seek out any help because I didn't think I thought to myself, how could somebody talk me out of feeling inadequate? That's just a bunch of hocus pocus. And then if they say, well, medication, like it just make me have an altered state of consciousness, and I couldn't have that. I had to be sharp on my game. Um, I always thought that I was never smart enough, so I would outwork everybody. I would over prepare. I would prepare 3 or 4 times more than anyone else. I mean, I vowed to get into law school. I said, look, I know I'm not very bright, but no one's going to outwork me. I control my effort. And that's always been, to the extent I've had success, my reason for success is that I prepare. I've always been over prepared for every trial I've ever had. I've had 250 trials, more than that. So it's a fear of failure drove me a lot, but always on the edge of disappointing people whose opinion I cherished. And
That's also exhausting too, that mental.
oh, it's terribly. And most of my life I've lived in misery, honestly,
Yeah.
up until the point that I attempted suicide.
Can you tell me about that time?
Yeah, I had my first health problems in 2022. Got not diagnosed with a heart condition and a rapid heartbeat, and they had to be hospitalized to restart my heart. They put me on medication, and that didn't really do anything. They put me on blood thinner. They were concerned about blood clots. One thing you have to be very careful about if you're on blood thinner is if you fall, trauma can burst your blood vessels very easily. And I happened to fall a couple of months after I was on it, the medication on blood thinner in May of 22, and sustained a brain bleed. I was in the hospital for about 4 weeks in ICU, um, in and out of the hospital for the rest of 2022. What I didn't know at the time was that a brain bleed can have an impact on your short-term memory. And in January of 2023, I opened the mail from the Kentucky Court of Appeals, and it was a decision involving a really high-profile case that I'd won at trial. It had a lot of publicity in the newspaper and television. And it was an upset. It was a major upset. And my clients were thrilled, and I loved them. And we celebrated. It was just really pure joy. And this appeal was about that case. And I read in the course of the opinion that the court observed that the respondents' counsel, which was me, had not filed a brief in the case. And they reversed the decision. And I thought, wait a minute, what? I mean, of course I filed a brief. I won this case. Why would I not file a brief? But I checked, and it was due the time I was recovering from the brain bleed, and I just forgot, and I forgot to file it, and missed my scheduling calendar, and the case was over. And for the first time in 42 years, I'd hurt a client. And also, I realized that I had ruined my career. My career was over. I had
Was that
embarrassment.
Bruce? Was that a rational thought at the time?
No,
No.
no. But for most of my life, I hadn't engaged in rational thinking
Yeah.
because my self worth was dependent upon somebody complimenting me for my performance, not about who I was or what I did or how honest I was. And I treated people. I mean, always done a lot of pro bono and volunteer work because I enjoyed it. I always liked representing the little guy, if you will, the person that is marginalized, forgotten, that is facing uphill battles. That's why I went to law school. I love those challenges. And I think in large part because I've always viewed myself that way. Someone that was always seeking to be worthy. And so I identified with those people. And those are the kind of people I love representing, whether I make any money or not. Now, I like spending money, but making money was never has driven my wagon train in the practice of law. The bigger the challenge, the cause, that excites me to no end. I love that, to be involved in creating justice for someone who, but for a lawyer, would not achieve it. And so I embraced that role. It fit my personality. And for the first time in my career, I'd failed. And I couldn't accept it. I could not accept it. It wasn't rational, but I concluded that I was better off dead because I'd hurt these people. I couldn't fix the mistake. I had humiliated myself. The legal profession was going to look at me, in a very negative manner. It would be like wearing a scarlet letter around my neck. My family would not respect me like they used to. And what I had done would taint them in terms of humiliation. So, and they didn't deserve that. I have a wife and two daughters. And so I just knew instantly when I saw that court's opinion that I had to go about executing my suicide plan, and I did.
And why didn't it work?
Well, despite my best efforts, and you don't know me, but as I say, no one is going to outwork me. They may be much more bright and get it done faster because they're smarter. But to the extent I'm going to be prepared for whatever time that I have to be prepared. And for outcomes that I can control myself, they happen. They've always happened if I can control the outcome. So I went and bought the most powerful handgun in a gun store in Lexington, Kentucky, where I live. And the United States, unfortunately, you can walk into a gun shop and buy the most powerful handgun in the store in 5 minutes. That's it. And I bought it. I bought hollow point bullets that explode on impact. I wanted to make sure I was dead. I did not want to survive and be in a nursing home and have my family have to come and visit me. I was going to be successful as I would prepare for a trial. And so I got the gun. I came home. I wrote a note to my family. That my wife was out of town at work. My daughters are grown and they're out of the house. And I got all of my estate documents and set them on the kitchen counter. I didn't want to kill myself in the house and have her come home and find me like that. So I took an Uber to a cemetery south of Lexington, about 15 miles away, in a town that I grew up in Nicholasville, Kentucky. And I went to a cemetery there where my sister and grandparents are buried, Maple Grove Cemetery in Nicholasville, Kentucky. And walked around the cemetery for a little while. I did kind of pause, like, really, Simpson, is this how you want to be remembered? Is this how you want to die? And then I said, okay, let's get focused again. So I wanted to test fire the weapon. I hadn't fired a weapon since I was in the infantry in the Army 50 years ago. And but I knew how to fire a weapon, but I haven't fired one, and I want to make sure this weapon worked, this gun. And so it was a revolver. You could see the bullets on the outside of the barrel. And when I pulled the hammer back, I saw the bullet rotate into the firing chamber of the gun, pointed it to the ground, and pulled the trigger. And it was loud, really loud, louder than I remember the 45 automatic in the Army. Kicked my hand way back over my shoulder. Dogs started barking all around the neighborhood, the cemetery. I thought, my goodness, somebody's going to come outside and want to know what's going on. I didn't want to kill myself and somebody that was watching me. And so I called the police per my plan, called 911 and said, there's a body in Maple Grove Cemetery. And the dispatcher that answered the call asked where, and I told her where the body was. She asked me if I would be there to assist the officer. And I said, yes. And she said, the officer is en route, and hung up. So I knew my time was, I had a limited amount of time to get this done. I didn't have to remove the spent cartridge from my gun because it already passed the firing chamber. But I usually had double and triple check myself. I have double and triple, fail-safe mechanisms and contingencies on everything. It's just how I've learned to practice, and I've incorporated that into the way I live to make sure that I don't make mistakes. I was only going to do this once, and I wanted to be perfect. So I put the spent casing in my pocket. I pulled the hammer back on the gun, and I saw the next live bullet rotate into the firing chamber, just like it happened, seconds earlier when my test firing, when I cocked it, and I put the gun to the side of my head, and I pulled the trigger, and the hammer hit the bullet, and the bullet didn't fire. And I was dumbfounded, absolutely stupefied. What happened? I'm supposed to be dead, and here I am still alive. And then I see the police officer coming up through the gate in the cemetery. And for a second, I thought about pulling the trigger again, but I kind of froze because I couldn't kill myself with somebody maybe watching me. And he was about 75 meters away. I wasn't sure he could see me, but I paused and I put the gun in my pocket. He drove up next to me, ultimately, rolled the window down. As a lawyer, I've learned over the years, if you're in a difficult situation in court with a witness or whatever, try to take control of the situation and lead the conversation. And so when the officer rolled his window down, I didn't have any lies ready made. I kind of came up with it. I struggled, but I said, I'm sorry. It wasn't a body. It was a garbage bag. And I'm sorry you had to come out. And, he looked at me and said, well, that's okay. Thank you for calling in anyway. And then he drove away, but he didn't leave the cemetery. And I was going to finish what I came to do. I didn't know what happened with the bullet, but I had 4 more bullets in my gun to finish. But he parked, and it was cold. It was January of 2023. And in the States, it was about 20 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm not sure what that translated to Celsius, but it was cold. And I looked across the street from the cemetery. There was a gas station, and I had no plans. I was supposed to be dead. I started walking toward the gas station, and a thought occurred to me to call another lawyer in that town he and I had been good friends for many years, but we'd had a big case, and unfortunately our friendship ended because of it. It got really hotly contested, and it turned uglier than it should have. But anyway, I called him, and I hadn't talked to him in 5 years at all. I said, hey, can you talk? And he said, yeah, what's going on? And I made up this ridiculous story about my wife and I had an argument, and I took an Uber from Lexington, 15 miles away, to meditate in a cemetery in the middle of January at night. I'm a horrible liar to start with. That was probably the worst lie I've ever told. And but he said, hey, I didn't tell him I had a gun. I didn't tell him I was down there to kill myself. I never told him that at any time, but he said, hey, I'll come and get you. And so he did. And we went and talked for about couple hours and healed our friendship. And I thought to myself while I was talking to him, am I still going to do this? We talked, and I'm thinking to myself, are you still going to do this? And I thought, yeah, I got no choice. You've hurt these people, you've ruined your career. You cannot recover. There's no redemption that you can pull off. And so I told him, I said, it got to be about 11 o'clock at night. I said, can you just drop me by the gas station and I'll take an Uber back to Lexington? And he said, fine. And so he pulled up to the gas station, and I got ready to get out of his car. He said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to wait for the Uber. He said, I'll wait. I said, no, man, go on home. It's late. Go on home. I'm fine. I'm good. He said, no, I'll wait. And I tried to get out of his car 3 times that night over the next 20 minutes. And each time he said, I'll wait. I'm good. So I realized I wasn't going to be able to kill myself across the street from that gas station in Maple Grove Cemetery. And so he said, come on, I'll take you home. So we drove back to Lexington, Kentucky. It took about a half an hour, 45 minutes. We came over the hill in my subdivision where I live. And as soon as we came over the hill, there were 5 or 6 police cars staged in front of my house, lights flashing. I had no idea. I'm like, and he looked at me and goes, what's going on, man? What are you doing? What have you done? I said, I haven't done nothing, man. You know me. I'd never hit Cindy. I would never hit a woman at all. No way. And he said, well, something's going on. I mean, it looked like a raid on a drug dealer's house or a terrorist cell. And I said, just don't stop. I said, just drive on past. And, he's looking at me, wondering what's going on. I'm sitting there in my pocket with a 357 minus 1 bullet. And I said, just drive up. It's about a mile and a half away, and I'll walk back. And he didn't ask any more questions. He obviously thought something was amiss. There hadn't been 5 police cars in my neighborhood, and I've been there 25 years. And they were all in front of my house, as I found out later, from about 6 o'clock at night until midnight. Anyway, I got out of the car. He grabbed my arm. He said, now you're walking back, right? And I said, yeah, I'm walking back. He said, all right. He said, talk to you later. And I said, okay. I wasn't walking back. I was still locked on killing myself. Once I get locked on a mission that I need in my own judgment that I have to accomplish, it's going to happen if I have complete control over my, be it preparation or what have you. And so I walked away. I walked down into a big stormwater detention basin after he left. I pulled the gun out for the final time, and then a thought occurred to me. Wait a minute. He just drove you half hour home. You healed your friendship. You tell him you're going to walk home, and now you're going to kill yourself. How's that going to make him feel? And it kind of caused me to pause for a moment. And I, was kind of cursing at myself. Because there was no option out. Okay, it was death or nothing. There wasn't anything to live for. I thought I was that mentally impaired, and so I was walking around. I started to walk out of this big detention basin, out of this big hole in the ground, and I get to about the top of the detention basin. Now, I have to give a heads up about what I'm about to share because it took me a year to share this. Because I never believed something like this happened to anybody. I would hear about what I'm about to share and think to myself, this guy is a charlatan. He's trying to hawk money. He's going to send a prayer cloth for $100. It's some prosperity preacher living in a $20 million house, flying around in 3 jets, saying he heard God speak to him and all this nonsense that I just, there were 2 things that I was the ultimate doubting Thomas about prior to January 25th of 2023. One was the efficacy of mental health treatment. I didn't believe in it. I didn't believe it could work. I didn't believe someone could talk me out of feeling unworthy. I didn't believe medication would do anything other than alter my mental state. I didn't want that. And the second thing I was a doubting Thomas about was belief in God. I kind of sort of maybe believed, but I found a lot of reasons, mainly because preachers I'd see on TV that I just mentioned that thought were hucksters, and other, a host of other reasons that I would look not to believe in God, and that was my mindset. So I get to the top of this detention basin, and it took me a year to get a comfort level to share this, but I have learned in trying cases to juries and judges for 42 years, soon to be 43, that whatever success I've had is that because I am totally honest with the facts. I don't exaggerate the facts of a case. I deal with the facts and make arguments to shape a jury's understanding of those facts to benefit the person I'm representing. That's what lawyers do. There'd be a lot of times I'd like to change the facts to help my client, but I don't, because I have learned a long time ago that most people can assess credibility of whether someone is being truthful. You might get past, one or two people, but not 12 people that sit on a jury. And they're a pretty good read of, can I believe this messenger, this lawyer for this person in this trial? And if they're not believing what I'm saying, my client has no shot. And so when I decided to come out with this about a year after my suicide, once I had realized that I wanted to be in a position to speak with other mentally impaired people, other mentally disabled people who suffered in silence like I did for most of their life or whatever time, to let them know I've been where you are, okay? And I tell them the whole story. And the rest of the story is this. I get to the top of this basin, and all of the anxiety that I had that compelled me to kill myself just vanished. Like I had a total sense of peace overwhelmed me like nothing ever before. And at the same time, inside of my head, I received a very comforting message which said, Bruce, you're not going to kill yourself. You're going to be okay, and you're going to be equipped to handle the aftermath of your suicide attempt. You're going to be fine. And with respect to that, with respect to being equipped to handle the aftermath of my suicide attempt, I've been fine since that moment on January 25th of 2023. Now, I needed mental health treatment. I'd never had mental health treatment. And I walked home. I threw all the bullets away in a dumpster in a shopping center. I walked home. I called my wife in advance. I'm going to skip through this part because it's very difficult for me to get through it. She called the police. They were there in just minutes, came into my house. First time the police had ever been in my house. And I told them, look, I'm fine, really. I'm past all of this. I'm good. I'm sorry you all had to come out, but I'm past all of this. They took the gun, wanted to know where the bullets were. I told them. And I know I just said, I'm sorry, guys, just, go on back. I'm fine. The lead police officer said, well, I know you say that, but we tracked you we tracked your phone. We pinged your phone while you were in the cemetery in Nicholasville. We got on your computer and saw where the gun shop was that you bought the gun. We saw where you rented an Uber. We got the note because your wife gave it to us. You go that far, and statistically, you're likely to do this again. So we have to take you into a psychiatric hospital for a minimum of 72 hours. And you need to stand up, put your hands against your living room wall. We had to pat you down for weapons. Of all the things that I ever imagined happening to me, I never imagined I would ever be accosted by police officers in my home, in front of my family, patted down for weapons, handcuffed, taken outside in front of my family, and all the neighbors put in the back of a police car and taken to a state psychiatric hospital that I'd made fun of since I was a kid. But that was me. I got that hospital about midnight. They put me in an unlocked room. They checked on me every 15 minutes. They had to unlock the bathroom for me to use it. They had to be in the shower when I took a shower. I had my first mental health session with a clinical psychologist, and he spent a lot of time with me for 4 days that I was there. Got into a lot of history of upbringing and things that I had really not wanted to think about, had not thought about, things that he pointed out to me about this, that, and the other. They put me on medication. They line me up for evaluation at the University of Kentucky Medical Center Psychiatric Department for a more in-depth analysis of my condition. And then I went and met with my clients that I'd malpracticed. I apologized to them for my mistake and provided them the statute of limitations for them to sue me for my malpractice. I then reported my conduct to the Kentucky Bar Association, which regulates lawyer conduct, so that I was square with them. And then I got fired from the law firm that I was with. So it was about as low as I could get, honestly, in terms of lived experience and in the absolute depths of the deepest abyss that I could ever imagine finding myself in. But I was alive, and I was actually feeling better with the therapy and the medication that doesn't work like I thought it did. I've never had any sensation of euphoria or any altered state of consciousness. That's not the way um, medication for mental illness works, at least from what I've experienced. And I've had to have my medication adjusted quite a bit. That's normal. It takes 2 or 3 months for that medication to set in and to be effective. But 6 months after I was released from the state psychiatric hospital, I was doing better, functioning better, thinking more clearly than I'd ever in my entire life. And at that time, I was 73 years old, and I started practicing out of my house. I didn't think, the rumors had already started out. You can't keep a secret like that. That a lawyer tried to kill himself. He gets on the police scan radios, and one thing I did not want to have a bunch of people whispering about me. If it's going to be out there, I'm going to tell it, and they can listen to me tell it. And so I decided to write an article for the American Bar Association Journal. It's a nationwide publication for lawyers, and also the Kentucky Bar Association for Kentucky lawyers, and the newspaper that had covered a lot of my trials. I called them. I said, you're going to read about this story. Eventually, I'm going to tell it to you so you get it straight. And so it appeared on the front page of the paper. Longtime Lexington lawyer tries to kill himself, now has a mission to save others. I mean, they worded the headlines, not me. But, once I got well, I'm like, and then I started to appreciate the stigma that's associated with mental illness. And it is awful. And, I look at myself, I'd made fun of people with mental illness wrongfully. I certainly don't do it anymore, but that stigma kept me from seeking help. Didn't want that label, and there I know because I've talked to people um, all over the world that there are many, many, many people suffering in silence with mental illness today, right now as we speak. And so I decided that, I wanted to be there for them. Okay. No charge. If you're in a stressful emergency, go to the hospital or call in the United States. We have a 988. It's a 24-hour hotline. Call that number. If you're in a crisis, call them. But I put in all my social media accounts like Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, which is probably my biggest platform, that if you just want to talk to somebody who thought suicide was a good option, who was absolutely at the point of no return, and pull the trigger, call me, because give me 5 minutes to help persuade you there's a different way. I never would have believed I would ever say those words, but I've lived to see the benefits of mental health treatment. Um, and the other thing is, as much as mental health treatment has helped me, belief in the Lord and seeking His guidance and studying His Word and seeking to do um, what He wants me to do every day and not mine, has changed my life, changed my thinking, changed my purpose, has changed my focus, and enhanced my passion of helping others beyond anything that I've ever experienced in my life. I'll be 75 next month, but I'm more energetic, more enthused. And honestly, I put my number out there for people to call me. Initially, people told me, look, you're going to get every crackpot on the planet calling you, Bruce. And I said, well, if I do, I do. I'll handle it. I can handle it. But I want to be here for people that were like me, who would have never made that call, who would have never
Just
talked to
can I
somebody.
just ask, Bruce?
Yeah, sure. I'm
You've
sorry. I'll go on and on.
No, that's okay. From what I'm hearing, and a lot of our other guests talk about the same thing, is that really it is a change in your mindset that has
100%.
got you to where you are today.
Yes.
What were the effects on your family at this time?
On my family, devastation. I never shared this, how I was feeling with anybody, ever. And it caught everybody off guard. Sometimes people that are mentally ill will give signals and signs. I never did because I knew if I did, it might compromise my ability to kill myself.
Yeah.
So I kept it all internal. And people would say, "How you doing?" I'm like, "Great, I'm doing fine, man. How you doing?" All the time, I knew I wasn't doing any good. I was, just making it up, but I could act. And um, my wife, the thing is, it's now a little over 2 years since my attempt. I'm doing better than ever. My family is not. It crushed my wife. It devastated her. I thought at the time, in my own twisted, tortured mind, that my death would be a better off for everybody. They wouldn't have to suffer humiliation. They wouldn't have to be fending off rumors about how I'd malpractice. And it's my wife said, Bruce, you're the last person I ever thought would kill himself. Uh, what did I do that caused you to get in that situation? She's asked me so many times.
The
Why
blame.
didn't you tell me all of this? We were married 30 years. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you reach out for help? My daughters, same thing. Dad, why do you keep all this up? And I would tell them, well, I didn't want to be thought as weak. I wanted to be looked at like I thought you looked at me, to be proud and this strong lawyer that protects everybody, that's immune from all of the maladies that the people he represents are. But of course, I was ignoring reality because lawyers are human too, believe it or not. And we're as vulnerable to suffering the same frailties of life as the people that we represent. But in my mind, I had to be bigger than that. And I think there's a lot of gender issues there for men. Men are much more likely to kill themselves than women in the United States. And so there's some of that macho bull stuff. But my family is still suffering from just my attempt. I talked to family members who've loved ones who've died by suicide, not just had an attempt, but died. They're devastated still, years after the event. I've lived just to see the impact my attempt has had. Knowing that, had I known that at the time, I would have never attempted to kill myself, because the wreckage that the family has to deal with after a loved one dies by suicide is unimaginable.
Do you think
It
there's
is.
also a lack of trust there from your family now as well? And when I
Yes,
say lack of trust, a real concern that you may do it again?
yes. Um, Typically the first year, they still track me on my phone everywhere I go, so they know exactly where I go, and I'm fine with that. But if I don't act, if I'm meeting with a client or doing something, and I don't respond to a text within their expectations, they get extremely anxious and then mad if it goes too long.
Yeah.
So I've learned to be very responsive to them because I put them in that situation. But yes, they're still on the edge, watching, have this heightened anxiety that they never had before I attempted to kill myself. Yeah, it'll have, I suspect, the rest of my life, it'll be that way.
Time to heal. Bruce, with what you've been through, we know that society has got a long way to go when it comes to mental health and so forth. What do you want to see change?
I want to see mental illness and its treatment be viewed in the same um, conversation with the same attitude as if somebody had cancer, heart disease, or broken bones. Those maladies are respected, understood. People talk about them when they talk about their what's wrong with them or a loved one. I've had a lot of conversations over coffee and lunch with friends, family, and clients for all my life. I've never heard anyone say when they're talking about their ailments or a family's ailments, I'm depressed, I'm suicidal. People don't talk about it, they whisper about it. They're ashamed of it. They blame almost the person suffering from their own malady. And it's just flat out wrong. It's discriminatory, it's hurtful, it makes it worse. And so I want to provoke open conversations about it, which is why I got my first tattoo in my life. A year after my suicide attempt, I got a semicolon tattooed on my right hand, which is a sign of a mental illness, mental health sign that I'm not finished. And then I had tattooed on across the knuckles of my left hand, I'm not finished, printed out on my left hand to provoke conversation, for people to say, well, what's that about? And I said, well, let me tell you what it's about, because I know statistically, a certain percentage of people are themselves have suffered from mental illness or have a family member or know a friend or somebody. And they need to know, they need to pay attention to them. They need to know to be there for them and not to ignore them or take them for granted or say they're lazy or tell them just think happy thoughts. All that is wrong. That is the wrong way to approach somebody that's suffering with a mental illness. So part of it is we have to break down the stigma to talk about it normally, and then educate people on how to relate to people suffering from a mental illness. And I tell groups all the time now that when I share my story, I'll ask for a show of hands for those people who are comfortable. If you have diabetes and take insulin, if you are comfortable, raise your hand. If you have high blood pressure and take blood pressure medication, raise your hand. If you have some other illness for which you get treatment without saying what it is, raise your hand. The room, almost everybody's hand is raised. And so I say, well, I'm Bruce Simpson. I'm a lawyer and I have a mental illness for which I'm getting treatment, but I'm functioning better today with treatment than I ever functioned in my life before treatment. So we're all the same, right? We're all functioning, we're all here. And I just try to break that down. I mean, I don't have any delusions of grandeur. When I speak to a group of people, my mission is to try to connect with only one person in that room, just one. If I can connect with one person and who will call me up later or say, hey, can you give me some additional insight or recommendations? That's worth it to me. One person. Or maybe they go and talk to somebody else and they never talk to me. But because I raised it and tried to normalize it and say, look, I'm talking about being mentally ill and I'm functioning great. I'm just trying cases. Many of them are on television. You know, Okay,
And you are 100% correct, Bruce. That is what this podcast is all about. Even if we can just reach one person, then it's
yeah,
been.
that's it. Just one.
As we wrap up, because we have gone a little bit over time, and I do thank you so much for being so raw and open and honest about your experience. What would be your advice to people, A, who were in your situation back a couple of years ago, and B, what's your advice to family members that are going through this?
Yes, good questions. For the person that's suffering, you don't have to suffer. No one could have been more negative about mental health treatment than me. I disparaged it and the people that suffered from it for most of my life up until I was 73. You don't have to wait till you're 73 and try to kill yourself to get a wake up call. I want people to learn from my mistakes and not their own. It's a lot easier and you can have a healthier life a lot sooner. Mental health treatment works. Some people need more help than others. I've had that. I've had to have more help than others. Medication may have to be changed. You may have to change therapists. But I'm telling you, as negative as Nancy as I was, negative Thomas as I was, that's my first name is Thomas, middle name is Bruce, you can be helped. I've talked to too many people over the last 2 years that where I was in January of 2023 who are now much better because they've gotten mental health treatment. I've witnessed that in others. Okay. So I've seen that in other people besides myself. For family members, I say this: be patient. Don't judge. Don't tell people to live happy thoughts. What do you got? Or demand of them and judge them for being laconic, not wanting to have any interest in working or do anything to even take care of their personal hygiene. That person is suffering. They're suffering in silence with an illness that you can't relate to, but it's just as real as a broken bone, a backache, cancer, or heart disease. Help that person. And sometimes you got to push politely, but firmly, and you got to keep after it. And the other thing I would tell family members is this: particularly if it's an adult or anybody for that matter, don't get your feelings hurt if that person suffering in silence with a mental illness does not thank you, or may even say, get the hell out of my life, I don't need you. Don't get your feelings hurt. It's not about you. It's not about you. That person has unbelievable pain that you can't relate to unless you've had it yourself. They need a different approach for themselves. Let it go one ear and out the other and hang with them. Continue to support them. And eventually you'll get through. And if not you, then who? You may be their last lifeline of sustaining their life and improving their life. Don't give up on them. I've been there. I could never fix myself. Never. I've got a bachelor's degree in sociology with a minor in psychology. I got a master in social work degree and a law degree. I couldn't fix myself. I couldn't fix myself. Nobody can fix themselves when you're that mentally impaired. And the other thing is you got to get to them sooner than later, because in my case, it festered for decades and it got worse and worse. It metastasized inside of my head and got worse and worse. No one should ever be comfortable like I was with self-inflicted death for 30 years. That's unnecessary. I'm telling you, it's unnecessary. You do not have to live a miserable life. You can be helped. And okay, you don't get good results from one doctor or one therapist, go to see somebody else. But eventually you will be helped. I've witnessed it too many times in the last 2 years. And if you still have doubts, give me 5 minutes to talk to you. I put my number on LinkedIn. I've talked to people all over the world, 859-229-3436. That's my number. I don't charge. And I'm not a therapist. I don't hold myself out as a therapist. But I've been to a place you do not want to go.
Bruce,
And you do not need to go.
I cannot thank you enough. That is absolutely amazing advice and very true, honest advice. And I really do hope that people listen and realize their own value in this world. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, as I'm sure all of our listeners do. Have a wonderful day.
Okay. Thank you, Kate, for inviting me onto your program. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Bruce. Bye bye.
Bye bye.